Okay, I think we're ready to start. Hi, this is Diane Damage. I'm with SCS Global Services, and I'm the training manager for our food safety training courses. And today we're going to enjoy a presentation with Leanne and Hina. And I just want to go through a few items that we'll be covering. I can switch over to our housekeeping items. So I know we do have a big group today, and there'll be more people joining us. Yes, they're constantly coming in as we're getting started. So just to cover this, throughout the webinar, you can chat in the questions in the question and answer box, and we may ask some poll questions, and we will go through as many as possible within our time limit. We may come to some a little bit later if there's answers that are going to be covered in the slides, of course. So should you have any technical issues, audio or visual, or trying to log in, try to reboot and start all over. It is a pretty simple system, but you may need to try again if you're having any issues. And this webinar recording and presentation slides will be made available to everybody who has registered, even if they haven't been able to make this actual live event. So just to cover a little bit about SCS, we are a leader in food safety and sustainability. We have many clients worldwide, 7,000 or more. We're a trusted third-party food industry certifier, and just in 2012 issued 1,000 certificates. They're covering a wide area throughout the industry beyond food safety, but in food safety we work with Global GAP SQF, of course, BRC, the harmonized GAP. We do GMP certifications. We are also specialized in the antioxidant superfoods and pesticide residue free with our testing division, and we are USDA organic certifier. We have extensive food retailer relationships, including retailer education programs on food safety, and we are accredited and have partnerships in sustainable certifications such as Fair Trade USA, FSC, that's Forest Stewardship Council, MSC, which is the Marine Stewardship Council, ASC, NSF, RSB, Bunsucro, and more. So anyway, today you're here to learn about some food safety updates with SQF, and we're very lucky to have Leanne, who is our Senior Technical Director for this SQF Institute. She's responsible for all the elements of the SQF program, including the development, maintenance, and technical support of the SQF code and supporting materials. She has 25 years of food service experience, specializing in supply chain food safety and quality assurance. And also, Hina Patel, who is our Director for Food Safety at SCS Global Services. She has been directing our programs for growers, packers, shippers, processors, and other agricultural operations for at least 20 years now. And she manages a team that specializes in our audits for SQF and BRC. She has experience in food quality, assurance, auditing, microbiology, and plant sanitation in the food industry. And you're certainly welcome to contact Hina or Leanne after this program if we don't get everybody's questions answered. So now I'd like to turn this over to Leanne, and I'm going to just sign off for a little while. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today about the changes to the 7.2 code. As Diane mentioned, what we will be doing is going over the changes to the 7.2 code, and then Hina is going to wrap things up and provide some top nonconformances through the SQF audit as it compares to the SCS suppliers. Specifically, what I will be doing is giving the benchmarking update where we are with some of our new codes that are out there. those approved modules that we have already benchmarked to GFSI, and then go into those heart of the changes and some of those modules in development and the resources that are available right now for 7.2. So as I'm sure if you've sat in any of my webinars, you see this industry scope diagram that I consistently show. This is the industry scope that GFSI has developed. What they did under the new guidance document is actually broke out the industry and specifically in specific scopes. So I call it buckets. So there's a bucket for feed, a bucket for farming, pre-processing, processing, catering and wholesale, distribution and packaging. So you can see that this is exactly how we developed our code. So it makes sense that we have a code for every one of these industry scopes. So if you look at the buckets, you'll see there's an SQF industry scope for any of these that there's GFSI guidance. And in fact, there's some when there's no guidance available, we still developed a code. Everything from feed all the way to production of packaging, food packaging materials. When it comes to what has been benchmarked to GFSI, there have been just a couple changes. First off, we still have those that were benchmarked from farming of animals, plants, animal conversion like slaughter, and then pre-processing and processing of foods, as well as biochemicals and food packaging. So that's all been approved by GFSI. Just in January, we were approved for our animal feed and our pet food code. So now we have a separate code for animal feed as well as pet food production. And that was approved by GFSI in January. Then what we still are waiting for is to get our codes for farming of fish as well as farming of grains and pulses benchmarked. We're missing those 10 certificates. And it's unfortunate because really SQF was founded in Australia, and it was mostly on those grains and pulses certificates, and what we need is now 10 certificates in order to get these benchmarked. It still means that those facilities undergoing an SQF audit for Module 6 or Module 8 would receive a certification that's accredited. It's just that it wouldn't be benchmarked to GFSI. There's nothing technically wrong with it. It just isn't benchmarked to GFSI. Additionally, what we're looking at is also the provision of transportation and storage services that has been submitted to GFSI. That was submitted a few months ago, so we're anticipating that we should be benchmarked to that particular module within the next couple of months. And then also we're adding one more module for the farming of plants, and it's the farming of plants against the harmonized module that United has developed. So the United Fresh Association has developed their own harmonized standard. And what they want to do is get it benchmarked, and they asked us to assist them with this. So we took their good agricultural practices, put that in a module called Module 7H, and we're working on developing and achieving those 10 certificates, and then we'll be able to submit it to GFSI for benchmarking. So we're preparing to submit that to GFSI for benchmarking. So here we are to the SQF Code Edition 7.2. I'm sure you all have some questions about this if I'm not covering it in my slide, or if you need specific, if you need clarification or have any specific questions, just as Diane mentioned, feel free to put them in the chat box in the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to do that, and I'll answer them as they come up, or if you want to wait till the end, you can always chat them at the end as well, and I can answer them at the end. So with the SQF Edition 7.2, there were about 40 different changes in them. Primarily in the code methodology, there was a few technical changes, and I'm going to go over all those in specific detail in just the next few slides. 7.2 is now available on the website, sqfi.com. It was available come March, or last March, and so it will be implemented for a July 3rd date. So July 3rd is the scheduled implementation date. That's not going to change. So in a little over a month, we will have everybody on the 7.2, and I'll go over the implementation. And we will go over the implementation schedule then. Okay, so the SQF code, when it comes to the changes, like I said, there was about 40 different changes. Here are some of the changes of Part A. Part A is the code methodology, and the first change is that surveillance audits will be a scored audit. So right now, surveillance audit, you receive a surveillance audit if you're placed under suspension for any reason, or if you received a C grade on your last recertification audit. Currently, that surveillance audit is not scored. Now, with 7.2, you have the opportunity to change your score mid-certification cycle. It doesn't change your recertification audit date, so that date remains the same, so it doesn't reset to that surveillance audit date, but it does give you the opportunity to change your score, either good, better, or worse. Actually, there's no option to change or not change your score. It's not like the better score wins out. So the surveillance audits are now a scored audit, except that the recertification audit remains the same. What we also did is addressed requirements for seasonal production for the initial surveillance and recertification audit. So a lot of the seasonal suppliers, they have to undergo an initial certification, and we ask that they be conducted during the peak operational part of the season. During surveillance audits, we recognize that there could possibly be no production occurring if you're a seasonal supplier. Yet there is still some pre-activity that can be reviewed and conducted as it relates to a surveillance audit. So we're asking the certification body to do a desk review or check that those corrective actions that were identified during the recertification audit or initial certification audit be reviewed and checked to ensure that they're ready to go when the season begins. And then for the recertification audit, we recognize because it's a seasonal producer, typically you may or may not have the same recertification audit date just based off the season. So if you're a month behind or a month earlier, that date could be changed, and it could be needs to be a little bit more flexible. So we are allowing now the certification body to make those temporary changes, and that if there's any permanent changes, they go through SQF. We also added to the CV criteria, but not to the code, that a traceability exercise occurred during the audit. A traceability exercise is identified as it relates following the code requirements outlined in the SQF code. So it's nothing different than what your typical exercise is that you do right now regarding traceability. It's just that right now the certification body is going to require that during the audit. And just as a little tip, while it's not a requirement, one way to truly check your system is to conduct this traceability exercise. It's such a crucial part of your system that if you conduct a traceability exercise and not just connect the lot codes to and from one up and one back, but really check the documentation as it relates to that product traceability. So if you're pulling can of tomatoes or green beans or whatever you're processing, and you're checking all of the records as it relates to that particular product. So you're checking sanitation records, pre-op records, you're looking at training records for individuals that made that product. You're looking at all that information tied to that product. That's a true traceability exercise. Now, we're not asking that the certification bodies do that during the audit, but it's a good internal audit tool or tip that you can apply to your organization. That's a true traceability exercise. What we will be doing is just asking that they follow the requirements of the traceability exercise outlined in the code. And then I'm sure some of you have heard about our unannounced audit requirement, and I'm going to go over that in the next slide. I just really want to check to make sure if there's any questions out there, and there is one regarding that the facility is not considered high risk. SQF has changed the definitions of high risk allergen to include allergens. So now would that facility be considered high risk? And Kelly, I'll get to that. I'll answer that question in just a few slides. So hang on to that question. That's an excellent question and one that's been frequently asked. So here's the unannounced audit protocol. There's pretty much, this is the protocol that is actually in Part A, Section 4.5 of the code. What you need to be aware of is that there needs to be a mandatory unannounced audit. It's a recertification audit within 3 certification cycles, and I'll go over what a certification cycle is in the next slide. But just to give you some background as to why we went forward with the mandatory unannounced audit, because we've had a lot of comments and concerns, questions, and actually we've had a lot of applause regarding the unannounced audit. Couple things. One, the Food Safety Modernization Act is probably going to go to all unannounced audits. Second of all, GFSI is looking to go to unannounced audits. And thirdly, there is a lot of retailers in Europe, specifically the UK, that are already doing unannounced audit. Walmart, for example, is doing a pilot of an unannounced audit in the UK. All their recertification audits are unannounced. Same thing with a retailer in Germany, is that all of their audits are unannounced. So that is coming down the pipeline, an unannounced audit protocol. What we wanted to do was be the leaders here in the United States. With our scheme, what we wanted to do is demonstrate our food safety commitment within this unannounced audit protocol. We recognize the robustness of the SQF audit. We recognize that having an unannounced audit as it relates to randomly throughout the year would be a financial burden on the suppliers. So our approach now is an unannounced recertification audit. This means that the suppliers aren't paying any extra money for an additional audit. They're paying the same amount of money simply because it's a recertification audit. What this also does is help narrow down the unannounced audit window. So what we have stated is that within 3 certification cycles, the CV shall conduct at least 1 recertification unannounced audit of the supplier. It has to be conducted within, because it's a recertification audit, it has to be conducted within that 60-day recertification audit window. And that audit window is that recertification audit date plus or minus 30 days. That's where we get that 60-day recertification audit window. The supplier is allowed to work with the certification body to choose the unannounced audit year. It's a mutual agreement, all right? So you're going to say call your certification body, this year works best for us, and the CV is going to say this year works best for us. It has to be a mutual agreement. You're working with your certification body to announce which year would be the unannounced audit year. You're also allowed to identify any blackout dates where you would not be producing. So for seasonal suppliers, that's especially important. You're going to identify those blackout dates as to when you will not be running SQF product. So when you think about the recertification, that unannounced audit window, you're looking at a 60-day period. You can count out weekends, right? You could probably count out Fridays if your audit is more than a day long. But you really, you're looking to see, you're narrowing down this window, and then when you identify your blackout dates, you're almost looking at a 30-day period where an auditor could come up to your facility on this unannounced audit. We do exempt multi-sites. We exempt multi-sites for a reason, and that's because multi-sites have to have a precise schedule, and the unannounced audit protocol just did not work with that schedule. So we exempted multi-sites for this go-around. It doesn't mean that they would be permanently exempted. However, we did exempt some multi-sites. So when you're looking at the recertification audit window, when you're looking at the certification cycle, I would just want to give you an idea of what the certification cycle is. So here's the code, within 3 certification cycles, there is 1 unannounced audit is conducted. So you have the years 2014, which is this year, the year that the code is introduced, 2015, 2016, and 2017. So if this is your first initial certification under 7.2 of the code after July 3rd, that's your first audit in 2014. Your recertification audit then is in 2015. That's 1 certification cycle. When you look at 2015 to 2016, that's your 2nd certification cycle. And when you look at 2016 to 2017, that's your 3rd certification cycle. So these are certification cycles 4 years, 3 audits, or 4 audits, 4 years, 3 certification cycles. That's how we work the certification cycle. So let's just say, for example, you looked at 2016 for your unannounced audit. So your unannounced audit then was conducted in 2016. When does your new certification, your unannounced recertification audit cycle begin? It doesn't begin until the following cycle. So it doesn't reset in 2016 and 2016 to 2017 be the new first recertification cycle. No, it sets to those next 3 certification cycles, 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, 2019 to 2020. So that's how the recertification audit cycle is. It has 3 certification cycles, which is could be 4 audits. It could be 7 audits if you had surveillance audits in between these certification cycles, but it is 4 audits, 3 certification cycles. That's how the certification cycles work. So you have those recertification cycles identified within there. Also, the recertification cycle begins with the 2014, regardless of when you started with SQF. So if you started with SQF last year in 2013, 2013 to 2014 is not your first recertification cycle. It begins with the implementation of 7.2. So everybody in 7.2, when they start with 7.2, starts in 2014. So it doesn't start with when you conducted your first initial certification. It starts when the 7.2 code has been implemented. So everybody will start in 2014, regardless if you are an initial certification this year or your recertification cycle or your recertification is this year. It has to be against 7.2 of the code. So again, if your recertification audit is prior to June 3rd, you're still under 7.1 of the code, and your recertification audit cycle won't begin until 2015. So that would be your first year of your recertification audit cycle. So then there are some just some key points that I wanted to call out. The CB and the facility work together to determine the unannounced audit year. The unannounced audit recertification audit year, like I said, begins with the first certification or recertification audit to edition 7.2. And then there is only 1 unannounced audit per identified certification cycles, those 3 certification cycles. Only 1 audit per these 3 certification cycles. That's how it works out. So there are some expectations that we're expecting suppliers and expectations for auditors, and I'm going to share those right now. The expectations for the supplier, these are just some tips in order to prepare for your unannounced audit, is make sure you determine that unannounced audit year with the certification body and understand that recertification audit window and what is the length of the audit. So when you're calling your certification body, when you call SCS and determine, hey, when is my next audit, and is this the next recertification audit, or is this an unannounced audit, what would it be? Identify when that recertification audit window is. The recertification audit window is set from your initial certification audit plus or minus 30 days. That's the audit window. So clarify that audit window with the CB and identify and work with them to identify that unannounced audit year. Make sure that you communicate to your CB in writing when you will not be running SQF certified product. Okay, these are your blackout dates. And this also isn't a one-time thing. This is ongoing communication between yourself, the supplier, as to the certification body, when you will and will not be running product. This is, like I said, particularly important when it comes to seasonal suppliers. And then make sure that you're discussing with your certification body any special security arrangements that apply to the unannounced audit. So whether you're in a region that requires advance notice, whether it's the security guard that they would have to address, making sure that communication is ongoing as well to the certification body. Now we are anticipating that the facility is audit ready at all times. That's the point behind this entire process, is that what we're trying to do is change the mindset. What we want to do from an SQF certification is provide some credibility behind that certificate. What we hear from regulators, what we hear from the consumer groups and other NGOs is that it's a scheduled audit. Therefore, it doesn't count. It doesn't count simply because it's a scheduled audit. Now, those are the people that have never been through an SQF audit, because we all know what goes into the preparation and the planning and the maintenance of that audit. But bottom line, what they're expecting is that there has to be some kind of surprise or unannounced visit when it comes to truly test the system. And this is where you all would demonstrate that you are audit ready 24/7, 365. And that's the intent behind the unannounced audit. So the facility should be ready at all times. But we recognize that there is some anticipation, there is some preparation just to organize and plan the audit. But these things can be done prior to during your recertification audit window, just to get things ready and to prepare for the unannounced audit by assembling that documentation, gathering those records and other essential information for a smooth and efficient audit and planning that during that recertification audit window. We changed the protocol so that we ask that the certification body and the facility work together in order to plan the unannounced audit year, just so that they can really prepare for that unannounced audit, prepare for that auditor to come into their facility. We're not asking that you prepare the facility. That should be the audit ready mentality. So what we want is people or facilities to be audit ready. Anybody could walk in, I could give them a tour of the facility, everybody would know exactly what food safety is and what their roles and responsibilities are. The facility is maintained, upkept, and all that. It's just that we're understanding that there still needs to be some preparation involved. Also, we're saying that if there's essential staff absent during the unannounced audit, that there really needs to be then backup personnel for those key positions. The SQF practitioner, you're looking at the plant manager, you're looking at all of that. Nothing has changed. So we get this question a lot, is what if my SQF practitioner is sick, or the plant manager is out, or whatever? The same would happen in a scheduled audit. You still need to have backup personnel. So this backup personnel needs to be available, and just in case that key essential staff is out. But again, that audit window is defined. Everybody knows when that needs to be, when they need to be in the facility. So also during the unannounced audit year, we are asking that you prepare to have those annual reviews completed prior to the start of the recertification audit window, so that the auditor has the right documentation to review. So that means that to have those management reviews and the internal audits and the traceability exercise and the test recall, all being completed prior to the start of the recertification audit window. Additionally, we ask that the receptionist or the security person or anybody, that the person in charge, that they're aware that an auditor coming from the licensed certification body may arrive during this particular time frame. And then when the auditor arrives, that you as the facility check to ensure that they are the ones that should be there. That means that the receptionist or the security person or the SQF practitioner verifies with the certification body that this is who the auditor is that they sent, this is here to conduct the unannounced audit. What we're concerned about is some security violations. What we want to make sure is that the auditor is there, they announce themselves, who their certification body is, and making sure that you don't have just random auditors walking into your facility. I mean, it's a good practice anyway, but making sure that all of that is being followed. And then also that the audit commences as usual, that the audit plan, the audit duration, the exit meeting, time and date are confirmed at the opening meeting. This is all what the expectation of the auditor and the certification body has anyway, but making sure all of that is being communicated during the opening meeting, and then making sure that there is always a guide available for the auditor during the audit. Again, it's security issues as well as just good audit protocol. We also have expectations for auditors and what we want them to follow. So we're asking that auditors always carry their SQF identification card and any authorization from the certification body. Again, the facility is there to verify and validate with the certification body, but making sure that that identification card is available by the auditor.
How many of you have?
Excuse me, but can you guys mute your computer, please? I'm getting some background noise. Thank you. We also want to, that we expect the auditor to welcome and introduce yourself to the receptionist or the person in charge, making sure that the auditor announces what they're there for, that they'll be conducting the SQF audit, and that the facility will be asking for your ID. The auditors also have to be aware and conduct that opening meeting with the key staff, following just your standard protocol. Really, when you look at an unannounced audit, really the unannounced audit part is about the first 30-60 minutes. So they need to be aware of that, and making sure that the opening meeting is commenced as usual, and that the facility is made aware of the audit plan, the audit duration, the audit schedule, including the time and date of the exit meeting. And that the facility, the auditor has to make sure that there's always a guide with them. Again, it's just good auditor protocol. We ask that the auditors tour the facility within the first 60 minutes of their arrival. So it doesn't mean it might not be their first, it just would be their first go around. They would probably go in the facility multiple times after that, but really within the first 60 minutes is when they should be walking around the facility. And we are asking that the auditors are planning ahead when requesting documents. See that there's a list so that the facility doesn't keep going back and forth. If you need to look at the HACCP records, the complaint records, the meeting minutes, the PRPs, the CCP records, etc. There's a list so that there could be somebody gathering this documentation while you walk around the facility. And then during the audit, we recognize that there may be some blackout dates that were identified by the supplier, and we see that the auditors look around the facility or look at the records to ensure that these blackout dates were indeed valid. And then we ask that auditors, of course, have to be organized and efficient, but this is a crucial time. Time management is so critical to the success of an unannounced audit, but keeping in mind that the depth and thoroughness of the audit should not be changed simply because the audit is unannounced. So these are some of our protocols. We had one question regarding the replacement card. If you're an auditor and you need a replacement card, then you would just contact Exemplar Global, and that information is on our website, or you can just email me and I forward that to you. So if you're an auditor out there and you need replacement cards, be sure just to go to your certification body, or you can email me and I'll put you through to the right people. Okay, so now we're going to get into Part B, and these are the technical changes to the SQF code. And so I'm going to go over each of the technical changes. So just to give you an idea that this SQF update sheet, the 7.2 summary of changes to the 7.2 code, is available on our website. This was pulled directly from that sheet, so just going over it with you guys in a little bit more detail. Overall, what we did through all of the PRP modules, we changed the reference to safety data sheets, or to material safety data sheets, to just safety data sheets, or SDS. We changed this based off of an industry recognitional change to all of this. We also changed in the post-farm gate modules the clarifying air quality. So clarification to the compressed air requirements. So we ask that not the compressed air, but the compressed air systems be maintained. And there was just a clarification of that. The intent has not changed. The guidance has not changed. So it's really the intent has not changed. We just provided some clarification to it just simply because we recognize that sometimes it's just not the compressed air that needs to be checked, although that would be one component, but it's also the compressed air systems that need to be checked. In 214 on page 48, we wanted to clarify the responsibility for who would be validating those food safety changes. And it used to say the SQF practitioner needs to do X, Y, and Z. Rather, what we wanted to do was clarify that anybody could do that. Anybody qualified to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be the responsibility of the SQF practitioner. So we wanted to clarify that. In 234, we clarified the requirements for co-manufacturers. We made it so that if an organization, a facility is using a co-manufacturer, that co-manufacturer has to identify or has to meet those requirements of the SQF code when it pertains to food safety and food quality. We also clarified that if that product or process is considered high risk, that there would need to be an on-site audit to the SQF code. It doesn't have to be a certification audit. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be conducted by the supplier, can be conducted by a third party, but there has to be an on-site audit that evaluates that particular co-manufacturer as it relates to the SQF code. We also clarified in 241 that SQF be added as an essential contract. So in 2413, we added that the SQF and the certification body be notified in writing within 24 hours upon identification of a food safety event that requires public notification. And I kind of want to clarify this too because we've gotten some questions about it, because there is a lot of public notification. There's a lot of public notices, especially with the internet and other social media. What we want to emphasize is that it would require public notification. So a lot of the information when you're looking at a USDA or an FDA notice can be FOIA'd, can be, a requested information, can be posted to the internet, but it doesn't require notification for public safety, and that's the intent behind that. So we don't need to hear or see every NCR or any other kind of 483 form or anything like that. What we want to see is what requires a plant closure, a shutdown, recall for food safety, class 1 or class 2. That's what we want to see. To us, that would require public notification. Same thing, in 2422, we clarified the use of the term exempted, because that is what's included in the code. So we removed the term excluded. That was not defined in the code, but the word exempted was, and we wanted to be consistent with the terminology. 242, we clarified the risk assessment, and we provided to make sure that more people understand what the risk assessment is and when it should be used. If there is any time that the supplier wants to manage the SQF system and control it in an alternative method, or believes that the code is not applicable to them, whether it's allergen management or the use of foreign material detection, any of that, then they need to conduct a risk assessment to either be exempted out of that particular change or use an alternative control. So we wanted to clarify that as well. And 244, this is about food quality, and we removed the designation for the mandatory to the entire element. Rather, we only put it to the 2441, which is the development of the food quality plan. 2442 addresses the use of the quality shield, which is not a mandatory requirement. 251 251 again describes those responsibilities for validation and verification activities. Again, it used to say that it has to be conducted by the SQF practitioner. Now we've clarified it so that it's more anybody that's qualified. It just needs to be conducted. Bottom line, the intent isn't that the SQF practitioner has to do it, but that it has to be done. And then 263 again clarified that SQF and the CV have to be included as the essential contacts. We included this in there because while we put it in Part A of the code, it was never auditable, and it was always a discussion between the facility and the auditor what the consequence would be. So now it's auditable. Now it would be either a minor or a major depending on the level that they see. So that's within Module 2. Under Module 5, we had just a few changes. Under Module 572, and this is relating to farming of animal products. 572, we wanted to clarify the reference to crops. It used to say a crop protection plan, but really it's the feed crop. It's not any other agricultural crops, but the crop that's used to feed the animals. And we also clarified 5.7.1 and modified that particular element so that it includes dietary supplements. So the purchasing of vaccines, medications, and vitamins, as well as dietary supplements. So we clarified a little bit on Module 5. Module 7, there is just one clarification regarding chemicals when purchased when there is no applicable legislation. So there are some areas, I know this is brought up because there are some areas in Mexico where there is requirements to use approved chemicals for a specific commodity. And in some instances in Mexico there are approved chemicals, but it's not for a specific commodity. So at that time, what is the facility or the supplier supposed to use? At this time, we asked that there would be a risk assessment conducted to justify why they're using the chemical that they use. And it could be that they're using it based off of the regulations in the country, in a different country, or the country that they're shipping to, etc. So just making sure that that was addressed within the SQF code. And then I'm sure some of you have noticed we made quite a few changes to Section 13 or food packaging. What we did is try to eliminate the references just to food, but clarify that this is for food packaging. So again, for 13.223, clarified where the waste trap system is located, and we made sure that it was located away from any food packaging material. So we wanted to clarify where it would be, and clarify that it's food packaging material that we were referencing. And same thing with protective clothing. And we clarified that to say that where required, so it's not assumed that protective clothing needs to be worn. And the clarification of storing protective clothing, again, when protective clothing is used. So in referring to the types of materials that a packaging supplier would use, such as hooks, racks, or other forms that are off the floor storage. So clarifying that. And then how to store that protective clothing and what types of products can be used to store it. So it's typically off the floor storage to ensure that the protective clothing doesn't become recontaminated. Clarification of the use of bandages with metal strips. So we clarified that so that it would contain a metal strip or waterproof or colored dressing. And then clarification of when areas where personal habits are permitted. What we did is looked at modifying this so so we said where smoking, chewing, eating, drinking, or spitting are not permitted in areas where product is produced, stored, or otherwise exposed. Most of these references would have the reference to food, so we pretty much eliminated all of these references. I talked about the compressed air element. What we did is, again, modify it so that it talks about the packaging products. And then also clarification of how to store those protective clothing. So speaking to some of the questions that I got earlier regarding the definitions, we did add some definitions. One of the things that I think whether you're an auditor or a supplier is make sure you refer to our glossary of terms, simply because that's where the definitions are. So we established a definition for broker, and one of the things that I wanted to say was with the broker module, what we did is build a broker module with the intent that the broker whose firms they're representing meet the requirements of the SQF code. Couple things to note when you're auditing broker, if you are a broker, we need to make sure that the broker has in place procedures to monitor the effective implementation of modules 2 and 14. Those are the applicable modules, and including those reports of any internal audits that they've conducted or third-party audits of that contracted facility. So it's either a broker goes in and conducts an internal audit or contracts through a third-party facility or requires any type of GFSI or SQF certification. We're also asking that manufacturers, so brokers that are contracting with manufacturers of high-risk foods, undergo an audit by the broker or a third-party agency to confirm compliance. So if you're conducting a broker audit or if you are a broker. We also established certification cycle, a definition for certification cycle, which I went over. Contract manufacturer, we put together a definition. Bottom line, a contract manufacturer is one that is manufacturing product for the SQF certified facility. Now it's required, you know, that that facility maintain that level of food safety, because that SQF certified facility is pretty much representing that product. So we established a definition for that. We established the definition for customer, because a lot of times there was confusion whether you're a consumer or a customer. And then we clarified the definition of exempt. And like I said, this is something that has to be pre-authorized by the SQF or by the certification body. Here's the definition about high-risk food and the question that was brought up earlier. So the question was, now that we've changed the definition of a high-risk food to include a physical, chemical, or a known food allergen, does that mean any facility that has a known food allergen, is that considered high risk, or is that food considered high risk? And it's not necessarily. So perhaps the wording is a little strong, I will admit to that, but what we wanted to identify is that food allergens are a concern, that all food allergens need to be included in the food safety plan that is in the code and always has been in the code. But the food allergen requirement, it would really all depend on the risk of the facility. So if you're a bread facility and you use wheat all the time, it might not possibly be a high-risk food simply because of the facility and the production that you do. But in some cases it could be. If you're doing candy and you have peanuts and non-peanut candy, then it could potentially be a high-risk process simply because of the threat of cross contact with that particular allergen. So it really depends on that process. The intent wasn't to change so that all food allergens are now considered high risk. The intent was to bring out the light that food allergens are a concern, that they potentially could change your process to either high risk process or even a high-risk food, depending on what the allergen and the process that you're making. So that was the clarification of the high-risk food. All this was developed by our certification bodies that audit the facilities and then pass through our technical advisory council. So this has been run through a lot of different times, and as well as the training centers, and this is the definition that they all agreed on. Same thing with the high-risk process. It refers to the high-risk food. We clarified what a multi-site program is and why. I think because we had a lot of questions for the unannounced audit. I'll go over what a multi-site program is not. A multi-site program is not a corporate headquarters with a lot of sites. That's several sites, but not a multi-site. So a multi-site is one that they both hold an SQF certificate. The central site is typically a pack house, and the sub-sites are usually growers. So the growers are producing products like all produce tree fruit such as apples, and then it all goes into a pack house that pack those apples. They're all SQF certified. It's all based on a very complex scheduling program as well as a robust internal audit program. We also established a definition for non-applicable. Non-applicable is used by an auditor when the definition or when something doesn't apply to the facility at that point in time. So when they're conducting their audit, they see that there aren't any coolers in the facility didn't identify that through an exemption through the certification body prior to the commencement of the audit. The auditor is certainly not going to mark them up for any type of facility, for any type of non-conformance simply because they don't have coolers. That would be non-applicable. They'd also use non-applicable if the facility has repeated offenses to one particular area. So they don't want to double ding the facility. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you don't have a training program, or your training program just isn't what it should be. The training program then would be a major nonconformance. If you don't have a training program, you're not going to have refresher. You're not going to have an audit or training log or a register. You're not going to have those things. So rather than just keep marking nonconformances to all those subsequent items, you would get a major nonconformance for that main element and then NA for the following elements. So it means that that facility is still responsible for following the requirements under all those training elements. It's just marked NA so that it's not a repeat offense time and time again. We also established a definition for on-site laboratories regarding the use of good laboratory practices. We established a definition for rework. What we wanted to do is look at rework to include that's food, materials, ingredients, including work in progress. So a lot of times we have the assumption that rework is finished product going into raw materials. And I made Hot Pockets. I worked at QA for making Hot Pockets, and you can't rework a Hot Pocket. So if I was audited, we'd say we have no rework, but that's not true. There are some times when you have work in progress. There's times when you are have stuff that's left over that's going to go into the raw materials, and traceability is essential. So we added a definition of rework because this is a mandatory element in the code. We also established a definition for a sampling program that looks at a program of sites defined by the scheme owner, determined by the certification body upon specific criteria, and also a definition of unannounced audit, as we were talking about a little bit earlier. So before I go into the implementation, I know I had a few questions, and I was just going to save them all for the end. So I believe starts with, do I need to get certified as an SQF practitioner yearly? Actually, SQF practitioners never have to be certified. So there is no registration requirement of an SQF practitioner. The SQF practitioner has to demonstrate knowledge of the code. So going through one of these updates or going through even the professional update, that's a 4-hour webinar that SQF holds quarterly, that would be a good idea. That gives you an idea of what are some of the changes. But SQF practitioners do not need to be registered or certified by any ways. Flavor testing of food products in packaging areas, is that allowed? There is a requirement in, I don't think it's in Module 13, but I know it's in Module 11 that if you're doing any type of testing, so if you're doing flavor testing, perhaps that would be under Module 11, but there is a testing protocol. So if it's in your process to say, hey, because we recognize you're not going to bring everything back to the lab to test, but there is a process to ensure that product cannot be contaminated. If it's part of the process, then it would be allowed, but we need to have training and make sure that it's outlined so that you are following those specific requirements. Are there recommendations for additional annual or other refresher training for SQF practitioners? Like I said, what we have is those professional updates that we do, and that's done on a quarterly basis. We also have what's called these learning lunches, and I'll go into those in just a couple minutes, and that's actually good, just snapshots of training that we do, and I'll go over that slide in just a couple minutes. And then there's also our conferences. Oh, SCS chatted in a bunch of stuff, so hopefully you're reading the chat box. And then is there audit guidance available for SQF 7.2? And yes, there is. There's guidance available right now on our SQF website, and I'll go over where that is in just a few slides. So I'm running out of time, and I'm sorry about that, but I'll hurry up. This is, so just to give you guys an idea, I thought I had some additional slides, but I don't, I'm sorry. Just to give you an idea of what I have, what's available. So for continuous training, I would go to our website, sqfi.com/events, sqfi.com/events, and it has what we have as our Learning Lunch program. Our Learning Lunch program is 1 hour snapshots. Our next Learning Lunch is June 4th. We also have what is our SQF conference, which is at the end of October, and we have professional update webinars, which are 4-hour updates of the SQF program. So go to our events page. It has a lot of information. Our guidance documents are under the documents tab, so sqfi.com/documents, and the updated version to 7.2 guidance is available right now, and it's posted to our website. If there's any other guidance that we will be developing, the next one will be feed and pet food, and then we'll have more on modules 3 through 15 later on. So with that, I'll hand it off to Hina Patel. So Hina Patel is going to be talking now about those 5 non-conformities from SQF and SCS clients. So Hina, off to you.
Yep. Thanks, Leanne. This slide has information on the top 5 non-conformities taken from the SQFI Reliance database system. As you can see, that the findings are broken down into minor, major, and critical. And these are some of the common findings that was found between other CBs and SCS conducting the audit. These are some of the areas where the auditors had given NCRs. As you can see on the list, there are more findings given under Module 2, which covers SQF system elements, than Module 11, which covers prerequisite programs. I'll be going over a few NCRs from the list in next few slides. This is the area that needs to be focused on. This is maintenance of the building structures and fixtures. It's important to maintain building structures and fixtures such as roof, ventilation, ceilings, walls, floors, and other areas in the facility. If these areas are not maintained well, then non-conformities can be raised by the auditor. It is the responsibility of the maintenance department to ensure that the facility is maintained well. And that these, and that these areas are included in the maintenance schedule and that inspected on a scheduled basis. Also, these areas must be kept in clean condition and in good repair. A hygiene clearance record must be in place on repaired areas, and the areas must be cleaned and sanitized, inspected for any foreign materials prior to resuming work. What I have seen during the site audit is that employees, they fill out one form, and the form is completed by several personnel from different departments such as sanitation, maintenance, and QC. So it's very important that the personnel are trained on how to complete the form and to make sure that the records are completed fully. Also, the other area is to typically gets overlooked is wall-to-wall and wall-to-floor junctions. If the junctions are not sealed, it will collect food debris. Typically, the junctions get damaged by forklifts and pallets being placed against the walls where adequate perimeter clearance is not maintained. Also, these areas are hard to reach areas to begin with and difficult to clean. Therefore, these areas must be continuously monitored so that the issues don't arise later on. Maintenance of the overhead structures is also important. The overhead structures must be kept clean as well, especially over exposed products. The structures tend to collect dust and other contaminants from the factory environment. There are higher chances of getting products contaminated from overhead structures if these areas are not included in the sanitation and maintenance program. Some sites tend to have drop ceilings or gaps or void between ceilings and top of offices and other areas in the facility. These type of areas are used to store any unused miscellaneous items, which is not a good practice. These areas must be inspected on a continuous basis, kept clean, and monitored for any pest activity. So these are some of the key areas that the site must focus on to avoid any further nonconformities caused put by the auditors. Another area to focus on is maintenance of the equipment, utensils, and protective clothing. As you know, that cross-contamination can happen if these areas are not maintained well. Equipment and utensils must be designed, constructed, and maintained according to the industry standard. As we all know, that equipment must be non-porous, made of stainless steel, iron, or aluminum materials. There should not be any signs of cracks or crevices, rust, peeling paint, surface erosions, and there should not be any loose objects such as loose nuts and bolts and other materials which can end up in a finished product as foreign material. Therefore, product contact equipment inspection must be conducted daily. Equipment should be easily disassembled for sanitation and inspection during pre-op and after sanitation. Another area to focus on is maintenance of utensils such as tubs and other containers that must be clearly identified for edible products, inedible products, and allergen-containing products. Color coding system can be used, or these items can be labeled as long as the labels do not come off. If the identification is not maintained, it can cause cross-contamination and commingling of products, such as between edible and inedible products, and that's the last thing we want to see during the audit. All clean utensils must be stored in a designated area. Tubs and other utensils should not be taken outside and used for something else. Protective clothing. Protective clothing such as masks, gloves, hairnets, etc. must be stored in a clean, designated area and accessible to staff. It should be really accessible to staff. It should not be stored in any other areas where the workers cannot get hold of those protective clothing. Protective clothing must be taken off when leaving the work area and discarded when not in use. Employees should not get in the habit of storing them in the personal lockers or break rooms. Protective clothing must be made of material that is food safe and is easily cleaned. This is a very important section for food safety program, maintenance of the food safety plan. This is a quick overview of 12 steps to HACCP. As we all know that the HACCP food safety plan is the foundation of the supplier system. The supplier must develop and fully implement a food safety plan using the Codex or NAC MCF HACCP method, and at a minimum follow 12 HACCP implementation steps. There are 5 pre-steps, and the reason for these pre-steps are to allow the HACCP team to gather all the necessary information to put the HACCP program together. Step number 1, really quickly, the site must have a HACCP team in place. There must be a HACCP team leader that should be fully trained in the HACCP process. The HACCP team leader may be the SQF practitioner, and it's also important that the training is provided to all HACCP team members. Step number 2 is documentation of product descriptions. It must be prepared for all products included in the HACCP plan. Step number 3 is identification of the intended use. Say, for example, if the product is ready to eat or cooked by the consumer prior to consumption, or product intended to be further processed. Step number 4 is identification of the process flow diagram. That must be documented, and every step in the process must be identified. It should be a true reflection of the production process. Step number 5, the HACCP team must walk the process and confirm the process flow diagram during different shifts. Step number 6, this is where the principle number 1 kicks in, preparation of the hazard analysis worksheet and determination of control points and critical control points. And if a CCP is identified in the hazard analysis worksheet based on the severity and likelihood of occurrence, you can move on to step number 7, which is principle number 2, which is identification of CCP. Step number 8 is principle number 3, identification of critical limits. Step number 9, principle number 4 is monitoring of CCPs. And step number 10, principle number 5 is coming up with a corrective action plan just in case the CCP deviates. The site must be aware of taking effective corrective action plan. Step number 11, principle number 6 is verification of the CCP to make sure that the CCP is working and review of the records. And step number 12, principle number 7 is record keeping. make sure that the CCPs are documented. I would also like to point out that critical limits must be revalidated at least annually by the SQF practitioner. The entire food safety plan must be verified annually as well. When changes occur in the process, the HACCP plan must be updated and revalidated to reflect the changes. So this completes the brief overview of the HACCP program. The next slide is on validation and effectiveness. This is also really important to validate the CCPs and to verify the effectiveness of the prerequisite programs. I will give a few examples of how to evaluate the effectiveness of the prerequisite programs. Say, for example, personal practices. It's important to observe employees during the internal audit or daily pre-operational inspection to ensure they are following personal practices, personal processing practices. This is also making observations on the production floor to make sure that SQF code requirements are being met. This is a very broad topic. It covers all the prerequisites, GMPs, personal hygiene practices, and the code requirements. Training of personnel. It's very important to interview employees to ensure the job training has been effective and that key points are understood. One thing is providing training. Another thing is it's important to make sure that the training has been effective and that the employees understood the training material. Calibration of equipment. Is always good to get an outside contractor to confirm that the equipment is properly calibrated. Also, it's important to do in-house calibration, like a daily verification of the scales to make sure that the net weight is declared correctly on the labels. Another way of evaluating the effectiveness of prerequisite program for the pest control is to conduct trend analysis of the pest activity so that the site can know which areas are problematic. Also doing trend analysis of the equipment breakdown for signs of repeat problems. Cleaning and inspection. It's important to take swabs from the food contact surfaces and non-food contact surfaces to ensure that microbiological loads are acceptable. And also trending the positive findings to see which areas have common findings, and then coming up with an action plan to get a negative result if you see a positive finding at a particular area in the facility. Performing water testing to ensure that it meets portability standards. So these are some of the examples of evaluating the effectiveness of the prerequisite program. Moving on to validation methods for CCPs or critical quality points. It's good to have scientific literature in the book, or also have peer-reviewed published research papers to validate the CCPs. In-house or lab challenge studies. References to legally defined CCPs, such as, for example, pasteurization of milk, or some sites, they get the process authorities to come and validate the CCPs, or they might have technical expert in-house to validate the CCPs. The whole point is to make sure that the CCP is working, thus preventing, eliminating, and reducing the risk, which are physical, chemical, or biological. The bottom line is all validation activities must be recorded to confirm and demonstrate that they have been completed. Tips to improve your score. The responsibility of the SQF practitioner that the SQF program is maintained. The SQF practitioner must be aware of the code requirements. Training program plays an important role. Training must be provided to senior management. It starts from the top and goes all the way down to managers and supervisors and production workers. During the auditor is required to interview personnel in different departments to verify the understanding of their responsibilities. The trainer must be competent and understand the training requirements of the facility and the training program. Management staff, they should spend adequate time on the production floor to make sure the GMPs and personal hygiene practices are fully implemented. The site must also conduct overall SQF systems audit and find gaps. All deviations must be completed in a timely manner. The internal audit checklist is also available on the SQFR website if a site does not have an internal audit checklist. Basically, the facility should be audit ready at all times. How to respond to corrective actions. This is really important. SQFI has requirements on closing corrective actions. For minor, all corrective actions should be closed within 30 calendar days. For major, 14 days. And the corrective actions must be closed in the SQFI Reliance within those dates. If not, then it leads to suspension of the certificate, or the certificate will not be issued. It's also important to do root cause analysis to find the source of the finding, because you want to go back and ask question why that finding happened, and also coming up with a preventive action plan to prevent that finding from reoccurring. So when submitting corrective action, please do not provide blank forms. Provide some objective evidence to make sure that the finding has been corrected and it has been implemented. For example, pictures, records of training records, and any other objective evidence that will meet the requirements to close the finding. Does anyone have any questions on the slides? There's a question on having a problem with the backflow preventers. Does it matter where they are placed in the facility? Does it specifically say it has to be on each hose? Well, typically the backflow preventers are placed at the main water source, but it's a good practice to have backflow preventers located on the hose and on the water drop line, so that if there'll be a drop in the pressure way back in the plumbing system, you don't want water to be sucked back into the in the cleaning source. So it's important to have backflow devices located at several areas in the facility, in the plumbing system. Okay, Diane, back to you.
Analysis, and I can't answer that. I will let Tina respond to that, or Leanne, if you want to take that into everybody. In the meantime, I would like to just thank everybody for coming, and I would like to just see about what our last slides are here. And that is just to let you know about SQF Information Day, which is, we have a number of these throughout the United States. The next one in our area, the West Coast, is at STEMOS in Washington. And there's also one in Chicago, and I think we're done with, or actually there's one in Lakeland. We have a May 30th. There are many opportunities to get education, and this is another one, and this is also known as United Fresh. But FMI Connect is in Chicago, coming up very soon, and it's really a wonderful trade show. There's a lot of educational events and many exhibitors. I also see Rodney Clinton will be speaking as a keynote speaker. So if you can make that, great. There is the SQF International Conference, and that's in October, and that's a great opportunity if you're able to go and learn even more about all of the ins and outs of SQF and meet with other people and hear from experts. We have resources that are available, and these are through SQFI, the learning lunches that Leanne already spoke about. I would also like to just note here we have the technical, the numbers for areas in, I guess, Asia and Pacific, and our senior technical managers, Christy, if you have questions, if Leanne is busy, because she is very busy. And compliance specialist is Melody. She can answer questions as well. Plus, you can always contact us at SQF, and Carol Langston is our contact for doing any audits for SQF. I would also like to share with you just the way to be able to access our website, which is here. And you can get to our website and learn about all of our services that include all of the food safety programs that we offer. And for training, you can go right here, and it has a listing of all of the trainings that we offer. Here we have regular SQF training, and here is our new advanced SQF practitioner training. This is something that is new, and SQF just made it available to us as a training center. So we're doing our first one, June 5th and 6th here in Emeryville. And it's going to be very interesting, I think, for those of you that already have had some SQF training. In fact, that is required. It's not available unless you already are an SQF trained person and have your company certified to SQF. So here we have the prerequisites for it, but the agenda covers a wide area of things like internal auditing and learning how to do corrective action, better tips and tools for all of this. And it's taught by an instructor that we work with, Oscar Camacho, who's really excellent and has taken the training with SQF for this. Plus, he is an SQF auditor and consultant. So that's something, if you're interested in that, please send an email to me or give me a call, and I'll even offer you a discount for that training for attending our presentation here today. And here's more information on regular SQF trainings for people that haven't taken them yet, and they're available for at least every month. We're doing it in either Northern, Southern California, and we have one coming very soon in New Jersey. So I hope to see you soon, and thank you so much, Leanne Chabot, for helping us present this information, and also Jeanina Patel. And I think I will if anybody has any more questions, please send them. I don't know if you want to, oh, here there are a few more questions. I don't know if I should try to send this back to Hina. For the one person asking what's the criteria to be an SQF internal auditor for your plan. Really, you just need to have training in internal auditing. We also offer that course, and that is something that you can get possibly in a variety of areas. But the person who is trained in auditing just needs to be approved with that in there. I understand. So, unless somebody else wants to take over, I will say thank you to everybody, and we appreciate your time.